Oh, and meanwhile, it was dangerous for men to be floating around, even if you weren't a home army guy. You know, sometimes there were no questions, they just got shot. So my dad was hiding somewhere else. So here's my mom. Her German's awful, but her English is good. So she asks this soldier, can she please go and get her suitcase? And can she please send me to get Dad so he can be with us? The odds of having, a soldier who spoke English, I don't know what they are. Maybe even in the 40s, people who learned English. Anyway, he let her go. He kept me, but told Mama to go and get her suitcase. So she got the suitcase. Okay, so there was more negotiation, but okay, this time he kept Mom, but I got to go and get my dad. And I found him in his hidey hole. I'm saying, the army is here. You gotta come or you're gonna get shot. He was fortifying himself with vodka. But he was. So out he came. And the three of us then, my aunt and my cousin, the five of us, were marching to a gathering place.
That's in an old fort or fortress, is that correct? And at that point, are they going to separate the men from essentially the women? I mean, just to put it in two different groups? Okay, so your dad is going to leave. At some point, you're going to be marched from the fortress down to the train station. And do you see your dad at some distance through a wired fence?
Yeah, it took us all night to get to the train station. And since the city was burning, if you've watched the news recently where you see the fires in the West in California, where you see skeletons of homes and just red all over the place, well, when night fell, that's how the whole route looked. But anyway, so we get to the railroad station, and I do get a glimpse of my dad and other guys, behind a wire. So in spite of my mom's and my aunt's screams, what are you doing? I take off to talk to him. I couldn't get close enough in reality, but he waved and I waved, and well, at least we figured we were saying goodbye. At least that's what I was thinking. He does survive.
In fact, all of you survive. We certainly know that you survive because you wouldn't be here. But
right.
When the war ends, your dad has survived, and your mother and your aunts, and you're going to meet at a displaced persons camp in Czechoslovakia?
It gets gets hairy.
Yeah, we've got to wrap this.
Yeah, that's why I thought. In the end, my cousin, my aunt, my uncle, they stay in Warsaw. My grandma stays in Poland. But my dad and Mom and I managed to get to Czechoslovakia, to Pilsen, and eventually to Germany. And eventually, with my brother's sponsorship and a loan in those days, you still had to pay for your passage across the Atlantic. So it was the Catholic Charities that put up the money. And then as soon as we got to Chicago, Dad borrowed money from an old friend to pay off the Catholic Charities. And then eventually he made enough to pay off his friend. But we were in Chicago.
And that's the end of this story. Thank you very much for sharing that.
All right, Tom, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Our next guest is Konrad Schulz-Fincke.
That's correct.
And Konrad, people are going to wonder why they don't see a picture of you and your family on the big screen. If we could bounce ahead a couple shots, they'll see, there we are. That's probably the best we could do that shows anything about younger people. Can you see it?
Well, go ahead.
Okay. So it's really kind of a promotion, a poster for maybe Hitler Youth.
Mm-hmm.
Where are your pictures?
I don't have a picture.
Don't have a picture?
No.
Don't have any pictures of any of your family?
The reason for that is that we lost our home through an air raid in Berlin, and all our possessions went up in flames. So, unfortunately, I don't have any pictures. And the only pictures I have are located right in here. So, go ahead, Tom.
Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Berlin, and many years ago, my dad was a lawyer, and my mom was a housewife, and I had an older brother, and that was our family in Berlin. My dad worked for the German government in statistics. He did not have a law office because in 1922, when my parents got married, the Depression, of course, was the same as it was in this country. And the paycheck you got paid every day, and you better spend your money today because tomorrow it's only going to be 50% what it was today. So it was hard times. And just a short story on when my parents got married, Dad wanted to take his bride in a carriage. And he had contracted with the carriage driver. And he said, okay, and he paid him. And come the day of the marriage, and they get out of church, and the tour ends, the driver says, now I need some more money. My dad said, sorry, the horse is still alive. I paid you, and there is no more money. So the Depression was very, very great. And it was similar as it was here in the United States. The bank crash of '29 devalued everything what anyone could have. So it was not only unique to this country, it was common across Europe and everywhere else, okay?
1933, Adolf Hitler comes to power. Are you aware of his leadership?
No. 1933, I was a little gent, 6 years old. You didn't care about politics. We played, we had a family. My dad was employed, and we had a family life.
Does life start to get a little better for you
Well,
with each new year?
with each year, life gets better. And when Hitler came to power in '33, after he canceled the Treaty of Versailles, which was from the First World War. He became to power after the First Reich ended with Mr. Hindenburg. To a lot of people, you may recall we had an inflatable aircraft which crashed in the late 30s in Lakehurst, New Jersey, because there was a storm and destroyed the inflatable craft. It was named the Hindenburg.
1936, maybe 37, did you see Adolf Hitler?
Oh yeah, I went to the Olympic Games and I saw Jesse Owen running, and to me it was a great event because he was a real sportsman, and there is no way that one can take this away from him or anyone. And I didn't have any qualms even as he was a colored person, because you may eventually recall that in the 20s and also in the 1915, so forth, we had German colonies in Africa, Cameroon, German East Africa, and German West Africa. So we had colored people in Germany, so there was no difference to us, to me, or anyone else.
As you reflected on seeing Hitler for that first time, that was quite a thrill?
No, we just saw him there, that was it.
I thought you were going to say it was a thrill, and then you reflected on it later and you decided maybe it wasn't such a good thrill after all.
1936, I was 9 years old. So there's no way that you get enthusiastic about certain things.
Are you a member of the Hitler Youth?
Yeah, everyone was inducted into the Hitler Youth, which I would compare even to this day as the Boy Scouts. You went on hikes, you pitched your tent, you learned how to start a campfire. To me, there was no indoctrination of any kind. To me, it was fun as a teenager to be outside. We lived in a very affluent neighborhood in Berlin, and my brother and I, we went to public school. Our high school started with 10 years and would continue until you're 19. We had a rowboat club. We had horses. We had a good life as far as I was concerned as a teenager.
Jeanette was surprised that there was a German soldier that knew English. Did you have to learn English?
Well, in our high school, we start high school with the age of 10. So my first language was English, besides German. And the next, and included in that first year was also Latin, as it is the language of the universities if you want to become a doctor or physician. And the third year in high school, you could choose French, Arabic, Spanish, and our teachers would come from their country. We had a teacher from London who spoke English with us. There was no German language in our class. when it was the English class. The same was French. And our Latin teacher, he spoke 5 different languages besides Latin. So we had a very strict and eventful education, which lasted from about 8 o'clock in the morning till about 2:30 in the afternoon. And we also had school on Saturdays. This all changed with the outbreak of the war, because bombing raids forced us into bombing shelters. Every night around 11 o'clock, the sirens would go off, and the bombing would start till about 2 o'clock in the morning. The ground was shaken, streets were destroyed, houses were destroyed, people died. So school, for us then, there was no heating in the schools, and school was for 2 hours a day, where you get your assignment and you study at home.
Was the war starting to turn around against the Germans and in favor of the Allies as these bombing raids continued?
Yes, I would say it became kind of irritant to be under constant bombing raids.
Did you ever think at one time that Adolf Hitler and the Nazis would be able to rule all of Europe?
I don't think so, because my dad was drafted in the military in 1939, and he was a captain in the Air Force because he ended World War I as a lieutenant flying with the then and now so-called Red Baron Manfred von Richthofen, and he flew in biplanes. The story goes, when we ran out of ammunition, we threw the tools at each other. So, but anyway, my dad got put into the Air Force again, and he ended up in North Africa under Field Marshal Rommel. And during those times, the war in North Africa was not very nice, as no war is nice. I would like to emphasize that. And my dad became involved with the underground. And he had friends of likewise thinking that this war is not for the best.
Are you aware of the Jewish problem?
Yep. A lot of Jewish families lived in Germany. They were an intricate web of the prosperity. They were merchants. Our own physician was Jewish. And I had an aunt who was Jewish. And my dad tried to protect the friends, his Jewish and our Jewish friends, as best as he could. He even helped some of them to get into Switzerland, and from there on here to the United States. And after the war, when I came to this country in 1956, the first family who welcomed me in the United States was this family that my dad helped to flee from Germany. They lived in Alexandria, Virginia. They returned the friendship and the hospitality that we tried to give them under enormous pressure. And my dad, as I said, was part of the resistance group, and he was involved in the assassination attempt on July 20th, 1944, where a German officer, Stauffenberg, laid the suitcase under the conference table in Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia. Unfortunately, the attempt failed. However, there was the military were actively in the underground and trying to stop this massacre of death. And they paid their lives for it. And my dad at one time got pretty close to death. In the story, as I am told, was that amongst friends, he said, "We lost the war in Stalingrad, in Russia." And one of his friends did not agree with his statement and reported him to the Gestapo. My dad went on trial in October time frame in 1944. But he had a good lawyer that he had studied together with in his 20s. And